Antenna switches, what they are and what they are used for, by Paul, Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform, or 26 Charlie Tango 730 if you catch me on 11 metres and PMR 446.
Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Paul, Mike 0 Whiskey November Uniform, or 26 Charlie Tango 730 if you catch me on 11 metres and PMR 446. Now, over the 101 previous videos that are publicly viewable, I haven't covered antenna switches. So that's what I'll be covering today. This one's actually upside down, but that's okay. Well, it doesn't matter which way up it goes. It's essentially, you've got one connector there, which is a common connector, and two other connectors there, which are switched. But you can get more switched connectors, so you can have like 3, 4, sometimes maybe 5 switched positions, depending on the switch. So you can switch between multiple antennas or multiple radios to one antenna, or you could just use a two-way one like this to have an antenna on one, a dummy load on the other, and just switch between the two and the radio. Or what I did with this one is I installed this after my spouse asked for me to put a CB radio in the bedroom. So I thought, instead of just running the cable straight through here without allowing the radio in here to still be connected, which I put in here the Midland 78 into the position that the Grant 2 is now in. I'm not going to explain why. It's just the choice my spouse made, which I'm really not going into detail on. So I put this switch in to allow the Midland to be used and the Team RoadCom-FS to be used in the other room. And I did explain to my spouse that to make sure this switch was in the right position before transmitting, because otherwise that wouldn't really end well, because basically this doesn't really put a dummy load or anything onto the radio. There's nothing in there, so effectively the radio wouldn't see the antenna, and the finals will go pop. So it's one thing you've got to remember. So what's inside it? Well, it's already unscrewed. I'll just bring that in and I can show you what's inside this one. It might be different in some of the higher quality ones. This one's a Euro CB one, so it's really designed for CB radio. I wouldn't put more than 4 watts through that, because it just doesn't look as though the switch would handle the voltages and currents involved for power output greater than 4 watts. Although this did come with something else. When I got the Team RoadCom-FS, you may remember I mentioned it came with this. So it was a 35 watt linear amplifier, which less said about that the better, I think. So it's labelled up shack and bedroom. So that was more primarily for my significant other's benefit, although to be honest it would have been beneficial to me as well, so I knew how the radio was set up, but it didn't ever seem to be moved from the bedroom position. That's how it generally stayed. It was fastened to the shack desk, so it's just under, well, where this bit where the power supply is actually. So, but the Midland didn't really see much use. It was just the Team RoadCom-FS which is in the bedroom, and it's actually still there, although it only came out to have its microphone lead fixed. So I popped it back in there for the benefit of my spouse when the time comes the both of us can be reunited in person. But with this COVID-19 thing going on and a few other issues, then it's not going to happen just yet. So I'm just hoping it does soon. So basically what you can do with this switch is you can connect 2 radios. So we had the Midland on there, and we had the Team on there. The cable for the Team basically just ran out of the shack door and back in the bedroom door. We was using RG213 because I've got a fair amount of that. And this one just went to the antenna, which is the homemade antenna that we dubbed the spider antenna. I didn't have the boomerang at that time. This is the antenna that's up now, and I think it's getting a little bit battered by the wind. But it seems to be holding out alright, but I'll keep an eye on it, and if the wind gets too much for it, I'll get it taken down just for safety. So I haven't reinstated that feed yet, although I might do that as a test at a later date and see how it fares on that antenna, and we can go from there really. The long reach of the coax, I needed to put an inline coupler in as well, which would have added some loss. These add loss as well, but I don't think it's too much on the Citizens band. So, and to be honest, a little bit less than 4 watts isn't going to make a difference. So yeah, you can connect radio to antennas. So you could have an antenna on a different point on your property, further away from the house, or just checking the antenna there, or you could have the antenna and dummy load. So if you could flick the switch, and then you could put the radio onto a dummy load, and therefore you can test the radio, make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that's really all there is to them. This probably isn't going to be the longest video in the world, because it's just talking about antenna switch. There isn't really much you can go on this topic really. So when you connect them up, it's just a case of plugging all the cables in, making sure that they're in properly, and just remember that if you do put one of these in, just bear in mind that it doesn't act as a load for the radio, and if you try transmitting without anything on the other side, the finals in the radio will be burnt out. So you don't want to be doing that. And just seeing what else we've got to cover on that subject, and I think that would probably cover it from the standpoint of the switch. So 2 radios to 1 antenna, or multiple radios to 1 antenna, multiple antennas to 1 radio, or an antenna and a dummy load to the radio. It's up to you how you configure it. And this one's just a little CB one, like I said, and I wouldn't trust it with more than 4 watts through it. The more heavier duty ones aimed at the amateur radio market will certainly handle more than 4 watts. So if you are an amateur and need to swap between different antennas, say that are resonant on different HF bands, or you want to test your radio into a dummy load and test it with pretty much full power, then a slightly heavier duty switch would be what you'd need. I wouldn't, because this thing was aimed at CBers, and the legal specification for Citizens band equipment is 4 watts AM and FM, and 12 watts peak envelope power single sideband, so that switch should handle comfortably. A bigger, heavier duty switch. For those of you who choose to use something, say like this, on 11 meters, then yeah, you'd need a switch that you can be absolutely certain will take the currents and voltages involved in such high transmission power. So not this one, I don't think. I wouldn't want to test it, and I've not flash tested it, so that's not something I really have the equipment to do. So if you do have multiple radios and you want to switch between them, or multiple antennas that you want to switch between on one particular radio, then just put an antenna switch in line. This is more for those that have probably just not been in the hobby too long and don't really know they can do these kind of things, or even buy antenna switches like this. Although if you go onto CB and amateur radio equipment sellers, you will sometimes actually find a CB radio antenna switches, but sometimes it'll be just amateur ones sold under the CB radio section as well. So there you go. So you can have as many radios as you like, and you can switch between them, so you can operate in different rooms of your house. And that's exactly what we did with this when my spouse was over. So, and my spouse would always be able to communicate with me when I was at work driving around in the car, because I had a radio in the car. So, not the radio I've got now, because I obviously got that at the beginning of this year. It was a different radio, I can't remember which one it was, but it was a different radio. And the antenna on the roof at the time was actually one I was loaning from a local ham. The one I've got now is actually my own, which I bought with my own money. So, you can use these in a mobile environment as well, but to be honest, because you're just gonna have the one antenna on the car, so there's not really any point in my opinion. So I think that's just about covered it. Just one more thing, I'll show you exactly how that one's wired electrically. So I've got my multimeter. It's on the continuity setting. I can actually prove that. There we go. So although you've seen inside, I can actually show you it from an electrical perspective. So if I connect one side into there, this is going to be the fun part, other side into there. The probe has just come out, I am aware of this. And I put the switch in the correct position. That's how that's working. So if I swap this probe to the bottom one, which isn't making very good contact with that one for some reason. Probably a little bit of corrosion like I told you about. There we go. So that's basically how that's wired. But if I do this, and then I do this, all the commons are common together. All the outers are common. Yeah, so all the outer side of the plugs are all pretty much common together inside that switch. What it's doing is it's only switching the centre pin. That's all it's doing. But it still worked, and when I put it in line and checked SWR in the other room, with the signal going via that switch, the SWR was not exactly high. It was just, as I say, I tested it without that switch. So the whole feed to the other room was RG213, so that pretty much got rid of most of the losses, although I had to use a barrel connector to extend the cable to the position in which the radio was placed. So that would have introduced a bit more loss, but the SWR readings were no different, and then using that heavy 213 was the best call I could make, because it's not that lossy, whereas RG58 tends to be quite lossy, especially the drum of it that I've got, which I only use for making antennas out of. So, slight diversion there, but just bear that one in mind. If you do put an antenna switch in, there will be a little bit of loss. I have no idea what the loss on that one is, because I don't have a specification sheet, but usually when you buy them it will specify what the insertion loss is in decibels usually. So just take that into consideration when you buy your switch. So that should cover the switch. So this is Paul Mike 0 Whiskey November uniform, or 26 Charlie Tango 730 if you catch me on 11 metres and PMR 446. And yeah, I'm going to put this back where it goes now, and then it can be ready for when my spouse does return, or when I test it out to make sure it's still doing its job, which just means I've just got to run a feed through into the other room. And I could probably do that on the boomerang, and I should hopefully get the same SWR readings that I would get off the President Grant 2. Before I go, I'm going to just check my noise levels on the 1.9. It looks like they've gone back down to where they were. So whatever was causing that yesterday seems to have disappeared. Well, you just never know. So, 7.3s for now, guys.
Don't forget, you can subscribe to this channel and ring the bell to be notified of new videos as I upload them. 73s from Paul, Mike 0 Whiskey November uniform, or 26 Charlie Tango 730 on 11 metres and PMR 446.